Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. In this video, we'll explore how to add Swagger in Spring Boot application. So why we are using Swagger? We are using Swagger for API documentation. So if you are integrated Swagger with Spring Boot application, then you can use Swagger UI for API testing also. Now we'll create one Spring Boot application and we'll add Swagger UI into Spring Boot application. First we'll create Spring Boot application, and in that we'll add one user entity and we'll perform card operations from Swagger UI. To create Spring Boot application, we need to go to the start.spring.io, and if you see here, my Spring Boot application version is 3.3.0 and I am giving group ID and artifact ID. I'm giving user service. This is a package name. I'm using Java 17, and dependencies will add web, and we'll deal this one with H2 database. We need JPA, and one more dependency, we need Lambda. Now we'll generate this project. So project is generated. We'll import this project into IntelliJ IDE. So project is loaded into IntelliJ IDE. So if you see this pom.xml file, so we are using data JPA, web, and H2 database. So apart from this one, we need one more dependency for Swagger UI, that is Web MVC UI, OpenAI Starter Web MVC UI. This is the dependency is required. You need to add into the pom.xml file. Now we'll create project structure like now we'll create required packages. So we need entity, and next repository, and next service. Then we'll create controller. So with this project structure, required packages are created. Now we'll create one entity in the entity package. So here our entity is user. So we'll perform card operation on this user. So what the properties we require? We'll use user ID, name, and email. Private integer ID, private string, first name, private string, last name, private string, email. These are the four properties. So we can make this one as a entity class. So annotation entity, and we can add annotation data from Lombok. Then we'll create one more annotation is required. This is for API specification purpose. We'll use schema. So in the schema we'll define the description. So description is, this is user entity. Now ID we need to make auto generated. For that one we need to use annotation ID and annotation generated value, and we can pass strategy generated type identity will use. So it will generate automatic ID for each user creation. Here also we need to use annotation schema. So if you see this Swagger version 3, so here also we can define the description. This is ID. Why we are using this ID? Unique identification for the record. So you can mention the description for this unique identifier of the user. So for example, it is a 1 user ID, like it will generate a, like something 1 2 3 4 something like that. This will generate, right? So if you see, there are some these are all the arguments are there, you can use as per your requirement. Now I'm using only one, like example. So here I will define one. So this is schema, this is description about this field, what it is field. So like that you can create description for the second field also. So this is name of the user. This is first user first name, user first name. So this one also you can give an example like some name, for example AJ. And another one is you can use last name, user last name. So it is just like description about each field. And next, email. This is for email of the user. This is an example data, what kind of data it will hold in this field. Okay, so this is, with this our entity class is ready. Now we'll create one repository for this. This is user repository. This is interface. This interface extends JPA JPA card repository will extend JPA repository. So here we need to pass user. User is our entity. Then integer is the data type, and we can mark this one as annotation repository. Now repository is ready. Now we'll create service. User service. So in the service level, we can provide few methods for card operation. First one, create user. After that, get user, get all user, delete user, delete all users. We can perform public user create user. It will accept user as an argument. So here we need to specify import statement entity. Now we need to create object for user repository to call save user repository dot user repository. You can use annotation auto while to create the object. Now here you can use user repository dot save. Here you can pass user as a argument, and here we'll use return. So with this our create user is ready. Now we'll create one more method. For this case we need to use optional. If user is available, it will return the user, else it will return null. Next, one more thing, we can use list of users. It will return list of users. Get all users. Here we'll call user repository dot find all. You can call find all, it will return all the users from the user table. Okay, so now we created 3 methods. Now we can create one more, delete. Delete will not return anything. You can use delete all users. User repository dot delete all. So I'm created delete all users. You can create one more, delete user by id also. Now I'm created 1 2 3 4. Now create the APIs in the controller class to integrate the Swagger for these applications. Create the new class user controller. So our API specification logic need to mention inside the controller. So first, in the class level, we need to use request controller annotation and request mapping to make this one as REST API slash users. So now first API will use public user save, or we can use like create user. So we need to pass user as a argument. We can add import statement. Now it is done. So we need to call the method inside the service class. So you can need to create user service object here. For that one we need to use annotation auto wire. Okay, now so this is the method. So first we need to specify some annotations and at top of this method. First one is annotation operations. If you see annotation operation, this is from Swagger. Operation, what kind of operation it will do? So it will do the create user. Multiple fields are available, based on that you can use, but as for this example I'll use summary. So what is the use of this operation? It will create user, will create new user inside database. Okay, so you need to go with one by one what is the use of all these fields inside the operation. There is a multiple things are available. Okay, so next, inside the apart from operation, there is a one more operation we need to use. Whenever you hit this API will give the response either success or failure. If this failure, then what we need to show. If it is success, what we need to show, right? So that one also we need to specify annotation API response. If you see, there is a annotation API response and responses, both are there. So annotation API response will use inside. You can see the response code. If the response code is 201, then user is created successfully. You can define the description for that one also. So this is the response code. In the description you can mention user created successfully. So all this description you can able to see in the Swagger UI. Will show you. Now this is create user, right? So we need to specify post mapping. So now we need to call this user service dot create user, and we need to pass the user argument, and it will return this user. At the time of returning also we need to use response entity, but I'm not mentioning the response entity directly. I'm mentioning user object. Okay, so here we are using annotation operation, annotation API response. Two annotations we are using as per the Swagger integration, right? So there is one more API we'll create now, public user get. What is the API required as per this one? So get user by id, get user by id. Here we need to pass annotation path variable. So here we must to specify the accepting the request from the client. So here we need to specify annotation request body. So here single here we are specifying only id. So in this case we need to go with either path variable or request param. So I am going with path variable. Now integer id, user id. Now we need to call user service dot find method. What are the method available in the user service? Get user by id. We need to pass id. Then it will return user. So again here also you can use two annotations like operation and API response. You can copy this one, and here is a get mapping because it is retrieving operation. Now we can specify the two operations. What is the use of this operation? We need to specify. So here we are accessing the user based on the ID. So it is like get a user by ID. So we need to specify description also. Return a single user. As per this endpoint, it will return a single user based on the ID. And again we need to specify the response codes. So if it is success, then it will return 200 as a response code. Then the description you can specify user found. If it is fail, then so we are specifying only one, right? So we are using API response. But if you want to define the multiple responses, then we need to use API annotations. If you see API rest 2 are there. If you want to define only single one, you can go with API response. If you want to define multiple, then you can go with API responses. Inside the API responses, we need to define multiple responses. How? If you see there is a value, in the value it is expecting the array. Okay, so now we can copy this one and paste inside the API responses. This is one API responses. If the response status code is 200, found. If response status code is 404, there is a issue, user is not available, then it will return 404. If you are getting 404, then it is a user not found. So API responses and API response, that is the difference between these two. Okay, so with this we are added API specification for this particular method. Now we'll add one more method, public list of users will access from the database. Okay, list user get all users. So if get all users, and we'll call user service dot get all users, it will return list of users available from the database. Import statement. Now for this one also we need to mention, one is for annotation operation, what is the use of this API we need to specify. So from this we'll get all the users, get all users, description, return all the users, either return list of users. So this is the operation. Now we need to specify the response, API response. So here we'll go with only single one. If the response code is 200, then directly we'll mention description users found. So here not only the operation API response, so inside we are using response code and description. Apart from that, there is a multiple properties are available. You can see content extensions, headers, references. So you can use all these things based on your requirement. Now we are created get all users. We need to specify the endpoint. For this one we are using annotation get mapping. So here using annotation path variable, right? So here we need to specify that id, user id. So it will come from the client and we need to set to this. So now get all users are done, get user by id is done, create user is done. Now we can create one more API for delete. Public void delete all users. So at the last will delete all the users. User service dot delete all users. So it will not return anything. So here also you can specify the operation, annotation operation. So here this one we are using for delete operation, delete all users. So this is operation and we can specify annotation API response. If the API response is 200, it is users are deleted successfully. If API response is 404, there is a issue in the servers. Okay. So for that one again we are using API responses. Then we need to define two responses for this one. This is the address, then annotation API response. So in the API response, if the response code is 200, so this is successfully user deleted, user deleted successfully. So if the API response is 404, API response code is 404, then we need to define user not found. Okay, so based on the response codes you can define the API responses also. Now we have created 4 endpoints for this one. We place these APIs from the Swagger. So we are dealing with H2 database, right? So we need to add the properties into application.properties. So here I'm added H2 database properties. So I'm using server port number 9898. Okay, now we'll start this application. Now application is started, it is up and running. So here we are using user entity, right? So user is a reverse keyword in the database. So at the time of creating the table, it will give the issue. So we need to specify table name as a user like this. Else you can use any other different kind of entity also. Okay, now we'll go to the browser and we'll see. We are using H2 database, so 9696. So our H2 database is ready. You can use password. Okay, it is open. This is my user table. If you perform operation, there is no entry. Now we'll check with our Swagger. So Swagger UI.html. See, now our Swagger UI is open. If you see, one get, one post, another one is get. So if you see in our API side, the user controllers, so one is for create user, one is for get user by id, another API for get all users, another one delete all users. So first one is get all users, create users, get user by id. Then delete, it is not showing anything is wrong with the delete all users operations. API responses, we missed to specify this one HTTP request method, it is a delete mapping. Okay, now we'll quickly restart this. So if you want to perform this server restart automatically, then we can use the DevOps tool plugin in the pom.xml file. In this case, we no need to start and stop this server. So now we can go, we can refresh here. Now we can see delete also. So if you quickly see the what are the specification and the description we mentioned here. First come to the controller. So in the user controller, first API is the create user. Here we are specifying it is a create a new user. When it is response code 200, it will return the user created successfully. you can click the create new user. So here if you see, it is expecting arguments like id, first name, last name, email id, example schema this is. So this schema we are mentioning in the entity, right? So if you see, this is a response code. If it is 200, user created successfully. Okay, only one we are mentioned as the response code. Now we can try to hit this API. So here what are the arguments? id will be automatically here, automatically it will generate. Now we can try first name, last name, email id. So this example coming from the entity we are mentioning in the annotation schema. So example one, AJ tech, this way fields coming from there. Okay, so now if you are trying to execute this, d is one, it is created, AJ tech this one. You can go to the database and you can check this one. Yeah, user is there. Now if you want to insert one more entry, you can click, I can text AJ tech test AJ tech example.com and I'll execute it. Now you can go to this and you can run this query. Now second entry also inserted. Like now you can go to the one more like get all users. So what it will expect in the get all users? Get all users, there is no parameters it is required. If you go with our API specification also, so here get all users, so nothing is there. So when I execute this one, it will give the list of users. Now we have 2 users, so it will giving the 2 users. Then one more API we need to check, get user by id. So here we need to pass user id. So if you want, you can click on that, try it out, and here we need to specify. If you give user id is 1 and execute, it will give user id 1 related details. So if you give 2, it will give 2. Okay, now delete one is pending. If you go with the delete, and you can perform this try, because here delete, when you click on the delete, it will delete all the users from the database. Okay, click this execute. Now if you see, server response code is 200. Okay, so user deleted successfully. Okay, so if you go with the database and you can try this one, see there is no records in the database. So like this you can test from the Swagger. I hope this video is helpful for you. Please like, share and subscribe my channel.